guys, Kelly here, and today I wanted to do a video where I look up the lowest rated books on Goodreads on my TBR and read them myself and then kind of tell you my thoughts on them versus what they are rated out in the world on Goodreads. And so I stuck to books that were just on my physical TBR. The funny thing is when I actually found the 5 books, it turns out that 4 of them I have bought just in the last 2 months. So I don't know if that says something that I have suddenly started buying really poorly rated books. But still, I have bought them, so I want to give them a try and see if I feel the same way. The other thing I'll tell you is that I didn't pick anything that didn't have at least 1,000 ratings, because there was a couple on there that only had maybe like 150 ratings, and I just don't think that's fair for the book, because it might not actually be a bad book. It might just be something that hasn't been widely read enough that it got a wide enough range of reviews on it. So these all have at least 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. And so when I start this video, this portion is on May 2nd. So these are the ratings that are on there at this point. I'm not going to read these all like right this moment. As I read them, I'll show you all 5 now, and then as I read them, I will update you on my feelings and my ratings, and then end up with all 5 by the end. So let's start with the worst. So I'm going to start with the lowest rated book on my physical TBR, and that is Ever by Gail Carson Levine. So I actually just bought this at a library sale a couple months ago, so I only paid 20 cents for it, so if it does turn out to be bad, it's alright. I really liked Gail Carson Levine, but for some reason this book has been like her lowest rated book, and seems that people hate it, even people that have read other of her books. So I'm really interested to see why this one is so bad compared to the other ones. And that one has a 3.44 rating on Goodreads, which is not a great rating, really. And then the next one is Tonight the Streets Are Ours by Layla Sales. And this one I just bought from Book Outlet like 2 weeks ago. And so I guess I didn't do my research on it before buying it. This was the same author that wrote This Song Will Save Your Life, which gets very highly rated. So I don't know if that was just, she's just developed as an author as they go, or if this has some kind of content that people don't like. This one gets a 3.46 rating on Goodreads, so not much better than Ever. And then the next one is another one I got at that library sale, and it is Why We Broke Up by Daniel Handler. And this one has a 3.48 review, so all 3 of these have been below 3.5. Kayla from Books and Lala really loves this book, so I think it's one of those that might just be very polarizing, and that's why it has a low rating, that people either love it or they hate it. So I'm going to give it a try, because sometimes I do like stuff that other people don't like. And then the next one, I kind of could have guessed that this one could end up being in there. I also got this from the library sale. This is Gimme a Kiss by Christopher Pike. Christopher Pike was a popular teen mystery / horror writer back in like the 80s and 90s. And I read a lot of him as a teen. And I picked up these books just for more like nostalgia's sake. And this one gets a 3.52 on Goodreads. And then the next one, the last one, is The Night Sister by Jennifer McMahon. Is that how you say it? I'm not sure. And this is an adult thriller. I really wanted to read this book, so I didn't pick it up that long ago. I think it was only about 5 or 6 months ago that I bought this book. And I had actually heard several people that I watch on BookTube had recommended it, so I don't know if it's one of those that just like maybe sometimes with thrillers people don't like the way they end, and if they don't like the reveal they rate the whole book really low, so it could just be one of those ones that you either enjoy the ending or you don't. For me, sometimes even if I don't love the ending, I can still enjoy the way a book is written, so I'm still really looking forward to reading this one, and this gets a 3.67 review on Goodreads. We'll see if these books turn out to be ones that I don't like either, if I follow the general consensus, or if I end up finding some gems that I actually really enjoy and don't agree with Goodreads. Hey guys, so I have finished one of the books. I am not going in the order that I showed them to you because I'm still a mood reader. So the first one that I finished is Gimme a Kiss by Christopher Pike. And I kind of hated this book. I gave it 1 star. And I don't normally give out 1 stars, but because usually if I'm just reading for pleasure, if a book is headed towards a 1 star, I would just DNF it and not finish it. But since I was reading this for this experiment, I read it in its entirety. I did not think there was anything good in this book. I did not enjoy it. So I had read Christopher Pike, one of his books called Fall into Darkness a couple months ago, and I thought that thriller really held up over time. I thought it was still really intriguing and fun and exciting twists, so I was like, well, maybe this is like a hidden gem that I haven't like gone back to some of these books and need to revisit them. Well, either that one was a fluke or this was just one of his worst, because it was horrible. I think also it just this specific one did not stand up to time, because this was written in the 80s, and a huge part of this storyline is slut shaming and sex shaming in general, and it just is very much from the time period and does not work with current teenage experiences. So this, just real quick, since it's very short, this main character, Jane, she writes in her diary, and sometimes she writes some really like fantastical stuff, so it's not necessarily completely accurate to life, and one page out of her diary gets copied and spread around the entire school, and this page happens to be like her writing about her first sexual experience, which was actually a fantasy. She didn't have sex, she just wrote like what she imagined it would be like, and it got spread everywhere. So it's kind of like the movie Easy A, where she made it up but everybody thinks that she's out having sex or whatever. So that is like the impetus for what's happening, and then it turns into like people dying and conspiracy and things happening and revenge and all kinds of stuff, crazy stuff. But like the main part I hated was that like this whole thing with her diary, and like whether it was a sex fantasy or whether she really had sex, like it was like so bad, the way she was treated, the way she reacted, the way how everything happened. It just didn't, it really seemed like the 80s and not like what would have happened modern day. And one of the things especially, she was working in a dentist's office, and the dentist actually like pulls her aside, like this, he's an older man, he's like in his 50s or whatever, and is like telling her how he hopes that she is going to make better decisions in the future, and that he has decided not to fire her based off of this. And I'm like, excuse me, you can't fire somebody for having sex when it's not at work. And so yeah, so it's very dated, and like the adult reactions and everything just like is ridiculous. So that is the main reason why I hated this book. But then also, like, if I could ignore that as a sign of the times and just like enjoy the twist of the thriller, it still wasn't that good. One of the main reasons is the main twist that would be kind of enjoyable in this was the exact same twist that he did in the last book I read 2 months ago. And I don't know if it just happens to be the 2 books he used that twist I read back to back, or if that's like a common twist he used. But, you know, the first time it seemed clever. This time I'm just like, okay, yeah, whatever. Seen that exactly happen before. And then there wasn't really other twists other than that. And it was really ridiculous. Like, they weren't even like intriguing, like thrilling things happening. It was just like, oh my gosh, no. And then the ending was horrible. Like the big reveal was just another thing that was definitely from the 80s and would not be viewed that way now, and was just absolutely ridiculous and made me hate this book. Okay guys, so I have finished the second book, and I read Tonight the Streets Are Ours by Layla Sales. And this is a hard one to kind of discuss. I understand why it gets low ratings, but I don't think it's fully justified. I think some of it is problem that this book is not very easily defined. It doesn't really fit in a specific category, and I think that makes it harder for people because they go into it thinking it's something it's not. Which actually happened to me, but I was able to kind of separate out my feelings about it. But I do have to say that if I wasn't reading this for the challenge, I might have DNF'd it, because the first half is definitely a lot harder and kind of annoying to read than the second half. So let me first just tell you what my impressions of this. When I first got this book, I kind of assumed that it was a YA romance, because look at this cover. Got the 2 people, they're holding hands, just like looks, and even like the little tagline says, he seemed like the perfect guy until they met. So it implies that there might be some issues, but there's still like two people holding hands. Like it just, and it looks like all fun and flirty with the cover. So I went into this thinking this was like a contemporary YA romance. It is not. And so I think that that's part of why it might get lower ratings, that people go into it thinking that it's a romance when it isn't. And even the description doesn't really fully, I mean, it is what it's about, but it still makes you feel other assumptions. Like basically in the description, it's talking about our main character Arden, that she is recklessly loyal, and that's how she's described, and kind of how she feels taken advantage of by her friends and family, boyfriend, all that stuff. And she starts reading this website that's a blog called it Tonight the Streets Are Ours, and then she goes in search of the guy that wrote the blog in New York City. So yes, that is what happens. But it still like makes it almost feel like there's going to be a romance with her and this guy. And that's not really what this book is about. It's more just a coming of age and Arden kind of really discovering some things about herself and discovering more about love and friendship and loyalty and what those things really mean, and just coming into her own. And I think if people were to go into it knowing that, they might enjoy it more. And also, I do think this is not a book for everyone. That I don't even know if this was a book for me, really. If I had really known what it was about, I might not have even read this, and that would probably be fine. That I think it is just one of those that has a very select audience. It also is probably a book that is more targeted for a teen audience. Like, it is obviously a YA book, but sometimes YA books are easily read by adults. Like, I enjoy reading teen romances, because it's like everybody can remember their first love, and it's just like fun to relive that moment. But this really like is almost teaching something, so I didn't really get out of it that much, but I did think it was well written. I think this is probably more closer to a 3.5 star for me, because I do think it was like well written for what it is. And so I'm probably going to round mine up to a 4, because I think it deserves a better rating than it has. I just think that since it doesn't fit into a category, books that don't fit into these little niches sometimes have a harder time. I just think it's kind of mismarketed and just doesn't really tell you what it really is by the cover or even the summary, really. Okay guys, I finished the 3rd book, The Night Sister by Jennifer McMahon. And this is a hard book to give a synopsis for, because it's like a horror thriller kind of book, and it spans several time periods and about 4 generations. So in present time, when we start the book, a woman named Amy has committed a horrific crime, and her 2 friends that were from childhood friends are trying to figure out what led to this. And so then we like go back to earlier times when Amy and her 2 friends were young and the things that they discovered there, and then back to when the 1950s when Amy's mother was a child. So we're spanning all these decades, all in like Amy's family, and Amy's family lives in this like old motel, or at this old motel that they ran, but that the motel like went under in like the 70s. So before Amy and these other girls were born, the motel is deserted. And this gets, you know, really low ratings, but I actually really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4, maybe even a 4.5. Like, I really did think this was excellent. But I think I understand why people are giving it low ratings. It's because that this is like the perfect book for someone like me that wants like a little horror but doesn't want to go full out horror. And that's what this is. This is like kind of like, if you were to compare it to a movie, this would be like watching an Alfred Hitchcock movie instead of like watching a current horror movie, because it relies on the same kind of thing that old horror books and movies rely on, which is more thinking of like the atmosphere and the creepy factor and like shadows you see out of the corner of your eye and things aren't the way it seems. It's that kind of horror instead of like, I don't really do well with like modern horror that involves like torture or body mutilation or blood and gore and all that stuff. Like, this isn't what this is. This is all atmospheric. And so I think that some people that are used to the horror genre would maybe call this boring, or just it doesn't do it for them because they want something a little more graphic, where for me, that I don't like that, this creeped me out. And So it was really good. It totally had that atmosphere. I finished this in 2 days because the first day I was reading it and I was like absorbed and probably could have kept going, but it was night and I was so scared like after reading this that I ended up like watching cute videos on YouTube until like 1 o'clock in the morning so I could go to sleep. And then the next day I had to finish it because I felt like if I didn't finish it and have the closure of what the solution was, that I wasn't going to be able to sleep that night. So for me, it was creepy. And also this one like has that fine line where you don't know the whole story if like there's this mystery type thing happening with his family and you don't know if it's rooted in like a real thing, like a real murder slash kidnapping or whatever type of thing, or if it's a supernatural thing. And I love how she like the whole time I had no idea whether it was going to be a supernatural like paranormal kind of ending versus like just, oh, it seems paranormal but it really is just an average crime. And I love that. Like I had no idea, so then the ending was a surprise to me. Hey guys, so I read my 4th book ever by Gail Carson Levine. I can see why people are giving this low ratings. So this is it's kind of a hard to explain book. It's about it's 2 perspectives. One perspective is from a god of wind who looks like a 17-year-old boy, and then the girl is mortal and something happens that kind of like seals her destiny in a negative way. And then the 2 of them meet, fall in love, and try to together kind of thwart her destiny. And that's pretty much the plot of the book. It's short, so I don't want to give you too much. And so I have read 4 other Gail Carson Levines, and I've loved them all, given them all like 4 to 5 stars. That's why I was really surprised this one gets so low ratings. And the reason is that this doesn't read like her other books. Like she has a very like specific style of like kind of magical fairy tale like, and this one more like reads mythological, and the style is just completely different. Like this is told from, both perspectives are in first person present tense, which is kind of weird to read it. It kind of separates you from the story, which sounds weird because you would think that would almost put you in the moment, but it just reads a lot different because most people write in first person past tense. So it just, yeah, it reads different, so it takes a little while to get like into the characters, and then it does feel like the characters are very surface level. Like I just didn't really feel super connected to either of the characters and their love story, because like really the basis of this is like a love story, and like that their love is what saves them kind of thing. But this is like super insta love. Like basically they meet, and like the second time they're together they're saying they love each other, but the first time they met, they probably met for like a total of 3 minutes. Like it was like a really quick, say a couple sentences to each other, and then the next time they meet it's like, we are in love. So it is like insta love to the extreme. So it makes it hard to be invested in their love, and their love is what is going to save them. So it kind of makes the whole thing fall apart for me. Or if you're somebody that likes kind of like the mythological stories and isn't bothered by like kind of style of writing, I can see why some people like it. Like I read the comments and there are a lot of people that like this specific story, but I get why fans of her work would be disappointed because it is so different. And I personally just didn't really like it. I think I probably would give it a 2.5 stars. Probably rounded up to 3 on Goodreads because I don't think there's anything like wrong with it. It's just I did not feel invested. I read it read fast. I read it all in one day, like one afternoon, but I didn't feel any connection. I will probably forget this story in a couple weeks and not ever think about it again. Alright guys, I finished the last book, Why We Broke Up by Danielle Handler, and frankly I hated it. Didn't like a single thing about it. So 1 star. Let's take a step back. Let me tell you what this book is about. This book is a letter written from a girl named Min, a high school student, to her ex-boyfriend Ed, who they recently broke up. And it basically is, she's going to Ed's house to drop off a big box of stuff that reminds her of the relationship. And so this is kind of like her ranty, this is why we broke up Ed, angry, cathartic kind of letter. And the letter includes like basically the entire time they were like how they met, like their whole relationship that lasted a month. So like all the details from their month-long relationship leading to their breakup. So when I looked up like why other people didn't like this book, I wouldn't say I am in agreement with other people on the reason. You know, a lot of people think that based on that concept that like there was no character growth, there was nothing to get out of this book, and that's not why I don't like it. Like, I thought that concept was pretty great in theory, like, you know, just to look at a snapshot of just this like month relationship, what happened, like that concept sounds interesting, but for me it was just the writing was unreadable for me, and I would have DNF'd this probably within 10 pages if I had been doing it outside of this video, but I didn't. I almost actually, as well, halfway through was like, why am I doing this to myself? I should just DNF it. But I felt like I couldn't do, for the purpose of this video, I couldn't do like a my star versus Goodreads views because I don't feel right rating a book I haven't finished. So I have finished it. I made it through, and it is still a 1-star book. It's just the writing I can't get over. And I understand why he made the choice to write the way he did, because this is a cathartic, angry letter, that there is going to be more stream of consciousness and run-on sentences and all that stuff. Like, even though I get that, it still doesn't make the reading experience any better. And I guess just going in, I didn't realize that it was gonna be so much just like angry run-on sentence blah. And it also like combines, she loves old movies, and all the old movies in here, I think they're made up. Like, I'd never heard of any or any of the actresses or anything like that. But so many times, like, the sentences will start off like talking about a scene from a made-up movie and then go into like something that happened in their relationship, and it was just made it confusing and made it really hard to stick with the story. Like I said, the sentence is really long. I highlighted a couple, so like this page, this is like a sentence. Is basically almost this entire page is one sentence. So it was just like that made it hard for me to read it all. I just didn't enjoy any moment of reading this book, and just even beyond the enjoyment, I just struggled even trying to understand, because I had to keep rereading and like figuring out, is she talking about a movie? Is she talking about her relationship? Who is she talking about? So yeah, and I get that this is probably very stylistic and for a specific audience, and that audience was not me. So just know that going in, if you are going to read this, that it's going to be more stream of consciousness. So you want to be somebody that likes that. I just personally don't do stream of consciousness of any form very well, so wasn't a win for me. I did kind of enjoy the pictures though, like, so because she has this box of stuff, every time she talks about an item from the box, there is a picture done by, it says what, Maria Kelman, and I did enjoy the pictures. They broke up the story, and that's probably the only thing that I liked about this. So that is all 5 of the books. Let me just review real quick for you my ratings for them. These 2 got 1 star. This one because the writing, it just wasn't for me. I could not get through it. And then this one was outdated and boring reveals and lots of slut shaming. Did not enjoy that. Next was Ever, which I gave 2.5 stars. I think I will round this up to 3 on Goodreads because I don't think it's a bad book. I just didn't like some of the elements, like the insta-love and stuff like that. And the way it's written is a little different, but I don't think this is technically bad. It just wasn't great for me. And then I have Tonight, the Streets Are Ours, and this one I think just suffers from mismarketing, and it is meant for a smaller audience, and so I think by looking kind of like a romantic comedy, it just doesn't do any justice for itself. So this was probably a 3.5 for me, but I'm going to round it up to a 4 because I don't think it's bad. I actually did think this was really well written and a good story. It's just for a smaller audience. And then the last one was The Night Sister, which I really did enjoy. I'm going to give this 4 stars and give it a glowing review in my written review because even though it wasn't quite a 5-star for me, I really enjoyed this and will definitely read another one of her books. And if you are just starting out in horror, I think this is a good like kind of starting horror where it's not like so graphic that you would be like up all night or anything like that. So I thought that one was good. So those are my 5 of my lowest books, Goodreads rated books that I have read.